Okay, let's unpack this.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Today, we're not just looking at a single stage in military planning. We are really diving into the crucible where tentative ideas are forged into decisive action.
It's the absolute bedrock of high-level planning. It's how commanders and their staffs take a handful of potential courses of action and transform them into a single, cohesive, fully synchronized, executable blueprint.
We're talking about the core analytical steps of the planning methodology, specifically course of action analysis, course of action comparison, and then finally course of action approval.
These three steps are really the engine room of the whole military decision-making process.
This is where the rubber hits the road, conceptually speaking.
I mean, if mission analysis is about deeply understanding the problem, these three steps, steps 4, 5, and 6, are about rigorously testing potential solutions.
And testing them against an adaptive thinking enemy, right?
Exactly. And then confidently choosing the best path forward. For you, the listener, whether you are preparing for a planning summit or just trying to understand how massive organizations test their blueprints before starting construction, this is the essential shortcut to being well-informed.
It's the aha moment in planning where theory hits the brutal reality of the operational environment.
You just can't afford to execute a plan that hasn't been stress-tested, synchronized, and approved.
And to guide us through this intricate machinery, we are leveraging foundational knowledge straight from the doctrinal sources, the kind used by advanced warfighting professionals.
That's right. Our deep learning today is grounded primarily in Field Manual 5.0, which is the authoritative source on planning and orders production.
We are also drawing heavily on operational insights and some really practical applications detailed in excerpts from the Center for Army Lessons Learned.
Yes, which focuses specifically on mastering wargaming techniques and, translating historical experience into actionable planning guidance.
So our mission today is to dissect those structured analytical steps, the deep mechanics that refine and select the optimal course of action.
And transform a raw concept into a definitive decision document ready for execution. We aren't just reciting a checklist here. We're exploring the why and the how of it all. How the staff integrates every single one of the warfighting functions to make this whole thing work.
So we start at step 4, course of action analysis. We've developed several potential courses of action. Let's just assume we have 3 viable options on the table.
A common scenario.
Now we have to subject them to the ultimate trial by fire. Why is this analysis, or as it's doctrinally known, wargaming, so utterly critical before committing the entire force?
Well, course of action analysis is really the intellectual centerpiece of planning. As Field Manual 5.0 highlights, it's the critical step that allows you to evaluate and refine those courses of action before the stress of execution.
So it serves multiple purposes.
Well, absolutely. It serves 4 massive purposes. First, it synchronizes your combat power and resources across all the warfighting functions. Second, it identifies and, crucially, helps mitigate the inherent risks built into any maneuver. Third, it can exploit potential opportunities the staff may have missed initially.
And the fourth.
And fourth, it dramatically reduces the friction that would otherwise occur when the plan hits the ground.
It sounds like the highest fidelity rehearsal possible, but conducted entirely on paper, or I guess on a digital mapping system these days.
Precisely. It forces the staff to move beyond just conceptual thinking and really dive into the specifics of timing, space, and resources. It allows them to synchronize all the warfighting functions, movement and maneuver, intelligence, fires, sustainment, protection.
And in doing that, you'd uncover problems that were invisible before.
Exactly. Execution problems that were completely invisible on a static course of action sketch. It forces the staff to identify necessary decisions the commander will need to make in advance.
And I imagine it helps develop contingencies.
Most critically, yes. It develops the crucial contingencies for when the enemy inevitably doesn't cooperate with your plan.
And the outputs of this rigorous synchronization, they aren't just ideas, are they? They are concrete, codified products.
Oh, they're decision documents. The key outcomes of course of action analysis are a refined and complete course of action statement and sketch, along with a detailed synchronization matrix, a decision support template, and a decision support matrix.
And you develop that for each option.
For each option, yes. Having these products for every option is essential because even the rejected courses of action teach the staff valuable lessons about the environment.
And I suppose they can provide ready-made branches or sequels if the approved plan goes wrong, or even if it goes better than expected.
Exactly. If it fails or succeeds faster than anticipated, you're not starting from scratch.
It's fascinating how this highly formalized, rigorous doctrinal process is it's essentially a sophisticated way of institutionalizing the intuitive understanding of the environment that great military minds have always had.
That historical insight is crucial, and we see this principle formalized in the Center for Army Lessons Learned discussions about understanding the environment.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Think of Brigadier General Daniel Morgan at the Battle of Cowpens during the Revolutionary War. Morgan was not a career military officer, yet his profound ability to visualize the operational environment, his own forces, the enemy, the terrain, that translated directly into victory.
How did he translate that intuitive understanding into a synchronized plan? What did he actually do?
Well, he controlled the fight by choosing the location. And by doing that, he forced Colonel Tarleton's superior forces into a very narrow operational space, limiting their maneuver options.
But the genius was in how he arranged his forces.
Absolutely. His force disposition was the result of a conceptual war game he must have run in his head. He positioned his veteran Continental Army soldiers on the military crest of the Second Ridge, completely concealing their strength.
And he turned his greatest perceived weakness, the militia, into a functional strength.
He did. He knew the militia would break under sustained pressure, so he built that fragility right into a synchronization plan.
So he planned for them to fail, in a sense.
He planned for them to act predictably. He placed the militia in two forward lines. The first line was told to lay low, engage the enemy at about 50 yards, fire one volley, and then retire behind the second line.
Okay.
The second line was to fire two aimed volleys and then quickly move off to the rear to reform. This maximized the militia's short-term firepower, forcing Tarleton to commit.
And it drew the British forces straight into the waiting, hidden main line of veteran Continentals.
Exactly. He visualized the enemy's reaction to what looked like a rout of the militia and planned the counteraction, the hidden Continental line, perfectly. That is wargaming.
He used his enemy's psychological template against them. That's brilliant. Now let's contrast that with a commander who used terrain visualization to buy time.
Right. We can look at Brigadier General John Buford at the Battle of Gettysburg. His analysis was pure terrain-focused wargaming. He recognized that the high ground, the successive ridges of Hare, McPherson, and Seminary, would give him a defensive advantage.
And more importantly,
he recognized that Willoughby Run Creek would force the Confederate approach column on the Chambersburg Pike to slow down and compress. It would cause a necessary delay.
and his force structure played right into that visualization.
Correct. His cavalry brigades were equipped with breech-loading Spencer carbines. By deploying them as mounted infantry, using covered firing positions behind trees and fences, they maximized the efficiency of their rapid-fire weaponry.
So they fought a delaying action.
A decisive delaying action, holding those successive ridges for critical hours. The enemy reaction's slow movement in compressed columns was precisely what Buford predicted. This enabled his counteraction sustained accurate fire to buy time for the main Union force to arrive.
So the key takeaway from both examples is that the formal, methodical wargaming we do now is just the institutionalized, structured process for replicating that intuitive, critical understanding of terrain and force disposition.
Before the fight begins, yes.
That puts the necessity of Step 4 into a really powerful context. Before the staff can even dive into the mechanics of running the wargame, the commander has to provide clear parameters. What kind of commander's guidance is required for this analysis, according to Field Manual 5.0?
The guidance is the intellectual boundary setter.
Yeah.
It really shapes the depth and breadth of the staff's analysis. First, the commander specifies the expected participants.
Which means more than just the core staff.
Oh yeah. This means going beyond the core staff, your G2, D3, and so on, to include external subject matter experts, liaisons from adjacent units, or specialists like legal counsel or public affairs officers.
Okay, what else?
Second, the commander dictates the number of courses of action they want analyzed, which is really just a practical constraint tied directly to the available planning time.
Right. And third,
And this is crucial, they must specify the objective of the analysis. Is the staff supposed to synchronize action at the decisive point, focus exclusively on the main effort's critical event, or analyze the entire operation from start to finish?
and finally, the method.
Finally, the commander must specify the method of analysis to be used: belt, avenue and depth, or box, and the precise time period the analysis is intended to cover.
Now we move into the specific mechanics of visualization. This is where it gets really interesting. How do we structure this rigorous test? It requires more than just moving blocks on a map. There are 3 distinct doctrinal methods outlined in Field Manual 5.0 to structure the wargame.
Absolutely. And the chosen method is not arbitrary, depends entirely on the mission variables.
So mission, enemy, terrain, and weather, troops and support available, time available, civil considerations, and informational considerations. All of it.
All of it. The method dictates the flow and focus of the staff's collective visualization.
Let's start with the first one, the belt method. When does the staff decide this is the right tool?
The belt method is highly structured, geographically. It divides the assigned area into sequential, contiguous geographic belts that run the entire width of the area of operations.
And the shape of the belt is determined by what's happening on the ground.
Exactly. The shape of each belt is determined by those mission variables, typically key terrain, obstacles, or engagement areas. The analysis then proceeds sequentially through each belt.
So it's about conquering one geographical phase before moving to the next.
Precisely. This method is best for analyzing both offensive and defensive tasks on well-defined terrain, particularly where the terrain naturally divides the battlefield into clear cross compartments. It is also excellent for analyzing phased operations where the enemy is expected to fight in successive echelons.
Or for something like a gap crossing.
Perfect for a gap crossing. A river crossing is a textbook example. Belt 1 is the assault, Belt 2 is expanding the bridgehead on the far side, and Belt 3 is the penetration phase.
I noticed the doctrine includes a variation for stabilization operations, which aren't always so terrain-focused.
That's the modified belt method. For stability tasks, you're not dividing the course of action by physical terrain. You're dividing it by specific critical events or key objectives across all the different lines of effort.
So phase 1 might be something like secure key infrastructure.
Yes, and that would include objectives across security, governance, and economic lines of effort. The staff then analyzes the relationships among those events within that designated phase.
Okay, the second method is the avenue and depth method. How does that offer a different perspective?
The avenue and depth method focuses the analysis much more narrowly. As the name suggests, the staff focuses on one avenue of approach at a time, moving sequentially down the depth of that avenue from start to finish.
And you'd start with the most important one.
You'd usually start with the avenue that is most critical to achieving the main effort's objective. This method is particularly useful for offensive courses of action, where the force is penetrating deeply along a single axis.
Or for defense, where the terrain funnels the enemy.
Exactly. Or for defense, where the terrain naturally canalizes movement, meaning forces lack mutual support across a wide front.
So, if you have a dense forest or a mountain range that only allows one major road into the objective, this is the method to use.
It is. You exhaustively test that single path. The modified avenue and depth method in stability operations means the staff analyzes a single line of effort at a time. They follow that one line, say, restoring essential services from its start conditions to its end state, analyzing all the supporting tasks and potential pitfalls along that specific trajectory.
Finally, the box method. This one is clearly designed for surgical analysis and speed.
It is the most focused and time-sensitive method. The box method is a highly detailed analysis focused exclusively on a critical event or a non-contiguous area. You isolate a specific area, the box, and analyze the operations within it intensely.
Give me some examples.
Sure. Analyzing a specific engagement area, a complex urban operation area, a wet gap crossing site, or a landing zone far from the main body. It works best in time-constrained environments, like planning a hasty attack, or when planning operations in non-contiguous assigned areas where the overall timeline is short.
If we use the box method for speed, are we accepting a massive risk that we miss something crucial happening outside that box?
That is the inherent risk, and it's why the commander must approve its use. When using the box method, the staff accepts the assumption that friendly units can handle routine situations in the surrounding non-analyzed areas.
So they focus their brain power where the mission is most likely to be won or lost.
Correct. And the modified box method for stability does the same thing. It focuses the detailed analysis on a specific objective along a particular line of effort. For instance, analyzing the precise sequencing and security needed to establish a key government function in a single city center.
Regardless of the method used, belt, avenue in depth, or box, the results of the wargame have to be immediately recorded and displayed clearly. This seems essential for task organization development and, subsequently, course of action comparison. What are the key tools for capturing this dynamic analysis?
The primary tool, and the most comprehensive, is the course of action synchronization matrix. This is the single most crucial detailed output of wargaming. It visually displays time, specific events, friendly actions, predicted enemy reactions, and friendly counter actions across all the warfighting functions for each turn of the wargame.
That sounds like a massive logistical and intellectual undertaking. What's the standard for detail on that?
The entries in this matrix must include, at a minimum, the task, the purpose, the effects, and the assessment, or TPEA.
Can you break that down for me?
Sure. A task might be attack by fire. The purpose is to fix the enemy. The desired effect is prevent enemy reinforcement, and the assessment criteria might be enemy movement stops for 30 minutes.
That level of detail ensures synchronization.
It does. Furthermore, for the fires function, the matrix must include the specific system used, artillery, attack aviation, mortars, for each target engaged during that event or turn. This matrix is the literal blueprint for turning the concept into synchronized execution.
That detail seems overwhelming if planning time is limited.
And that's where we leverage the flexibility provided by the sketchnote method. This method is used specifically in highly time-constrained environments.
So instead of the big matrix.
Instead of filling out the large, detailed matrix, the staff records key synchronized actions, critical events, and necessary decisions directly onto the course of action sketch itself. It prioritizes speed, communication of the core concept, and identifying decision points over exhaustive detail.
So it's effective when subordinate units are already familiar with the unit's standard operating procedures.
Exactly.
So the wargame progression is standardized: friendly actions, enemy reactions, and friendly counteractions. How does the staff ensure they cover everything during that progression?
The staff has to be rigorous. As they cycle through the actions, reactions, and counteractions, they must continually assess and mitigate risk for their functional areas, protection, sustainment, and so on. They identify all required assets, including external support, and, most importantly,
The decision tools.
the decision tools. They develop the critical decision support template and the decision support matrix, which are the direct products of this visualization process, and which will be used by the current operations cell during execution. The G3, leading the wargame, is essentially forcing the staff to articulate every logistical headache, every communication failure point, and every necessary fire mission that the operation will encounter. Course of action analysis requires full, simultaneous staff participation. It is truly a cross-functional test that integrates every single warfighting function.
Right.
You need to understand that the value of the wargame isn't just the plan itself, but the shared understanding and synchronization that the staff gains by running the simulation together.
That shared understanding is key. Lift break down how specific staff sections contribute, ensuring holistic synchronization across the entire formation. If the operations officer, the G3 or S3, leads the wargame, who is the most critical counterplayer?
That would have to be the intelligence officer, the G2 or S2. They are responsible for modeling the enemy as a thinking, adaptive actor, not a static block of symbols on a map.
So they play the part of the enemy commander.
In a way, yes. The intelligence officer must project enemy reactions and losses that are consistent with the projected enemy course of action. This isn't just saying the enemy will attack here. It involves projecting their specific information collection focus, their movement and maneuver tempo, their likely use of fires, their air capabilities.
And identifying their decision points.
Most importantly, yes, identifying the specific enemy decision points that the friendly force can exploit.
What if the friendly course of action is based on the enemy pursuing their most likely course of action, and then they pursue a different one?
A classic problem. The G2 must ensure the staff fully addresses friendly responses for alternate, or less likely, enemy courses of action, not just the most likely one. This is where contingency planning starts.
And what about targeting?
The G2 plays an absolutely critical role in targeting. They produce the high-value target list during mission analysis. Those are targets the enemy needs for their own success. During the wargame, the G2 refines this into the high-payoff target list.
Which are?
Targets whose loss will contribute directly to the success of the friendly course of action. This transition from V to P is essential for integrating the fires plan.
Okay, moving back to the operations officer. They drive the timeline and sequence. What else is critical for them to synchronize during the wargame?
The operations officer is responsible for ensuring the maneuver concept is viable. Their input is comprehensive, including discussing external enabler support from outside the unit, like joint assets or higher echelon fires, and how those capabilities influence the operation.
And cyber.
Crucially, yes. They address cyber electromagnetic activities, detailing how these capabilities can enhance friendly operations or protect the unit from enemy capabilities in the electromagnetic spectrum.
And their air component.
The G3, or S3 Air, provides specific tasks and purposes for Army aviation units, lift, attack, reconnaissance, and adds necessary airspace coordinating measures. This must be a tight discussion with both the fires and intelligence officers.
And they have to wrap up each turn clearly.
The operations officer must end each turn or event with a clear statement of the maneuver end state at that specific point. That statement is the signal for all other warfighting function activities, sustainment, fires, and protection, to begin their synchronized actions.
The fire support officer then takes those key targets and the maneuver end state and builds the entire fires architecture.
Exactly. The fire support officer develops the critical fires products needed for execution. This means developing the fire support execution matrix, the attack guidance matrix, and defining the target selection standards, all while synchronized with the higher headquarters fires plan.
So they're constantly checking their work.
At the start of each turn, they review the priority of support, the specific fire support tasks, and all the fire support coordination measures currently in effect.
They also have to solve physical positioning problems for artillery and logistics, right?
Correct. They cover the physical positioning of organic indirect fire assets, ensuring they are positioned to support the main effort and are protected. They have to add graphic control measures to the fire's overlay, and often with the air liaison officer, discuss the employment of close air support and attack reconnaissance helicopters during the event.
And their matrix entries need that same TPEA detail.
Task, purpose, effects, and assessment for every single planned engagement.
The engineer officer, as you mentioned, holds a dual role, linking maneuver and protection, which makes their wargame input uniquely complex.
It is. The engineer officer speaks to both mobility and counter-mobility. For mobility, they detail tasks and purposes for engineer forces, covering breaching operations, the time and resources required, route clearance, and route maintenance.
And for counter-mobility, they're planning obstacles.
For counter-mobility, they must address the concept of obstacle use, where and why, the crucial timing of their emplacement, and enemy breaching capabilities.
This is where the interplay becomes critical.
It really is. The engineer's plan for obstacle timing directly informs the G2's identification of enemy decision points and the G3's timeline for maneuver. They also provide essential decision support matrix input for situational obstacles and closing obstacle lanes, which is critical for controlling enemy movement and forcing them into friendly engagement areas.
Let's discuss the protection function staff elements: air defense, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear, and operations security. Protection is too often overlooked until a threat actually appears.
And the war game is designed to prevent that. For air defense, the air defense artillery officer must discuss the enemy air threat and friendly engagement capabilities, including assets outside the organization.
And what they can't do is just as important.
It's vital. They have to communicate precisely what air defense is not covering for the unit so that adequate risk mitigation measures can be employed by others, maybe through dispersion or increased security.
And the chemical officer?
The chemical officer covers the enemy chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear threat, assessing risk to friendly forces and recommending the mission-oriented protective posture level. They also assess the debilitating effects of prolonged exposure or wearing protective gear on combat effectiveness.
And the spectrum of modern threats.
The cyber electromagnetic warfare officer assesses threat vulnerabilities, friendly electronic warfare capabilities, and coordinates offensive and defensive cyberspace operations. They work closely with intelligence and operations to ensure synchronization across the electromagnetic spectrum, protecting friendly communications while exploiting enemy weaknesses.
This is where you'd plan to jam enemy command and control.
Yes, and making sure that jamming doesn't interfere with your own friendly sustainment communications.
Finally, we need the expertise that ensures the plan is viable within the human and ethical dimension. That brings in civil affairs and legal support.
The civil affairs officer, the G9 or S9, is fundamental, especially in complex stability operations. They're responsible for ensuring civil considerations are fully integrated, using the 6 factors known as areas, structures, capabilities, organizations, people, and events, or ASCScope.
So they're focused on the local population.
Intensely. On host nation support, the care and control of dislocated civilians, and predicting potential civilian reactions, which can often be the single greatest non-military factor impacting an operations timeline.
And legal support, the staff judge advocate, they seem like they would be primarily focused on orders review, but they play a role in wargaming too, right?
Absolutely. The staff judge advocate provides essential legal advice on the law of armed conflict, the unit's specific rules of engagement, and the legal aspects of both lethal and non-lethal targeting.
So their input is immediate.
Immediate and critical. It ensures that all actions taken during the event or turn are legally appropriate and within the limits of declared policy. This is a vital component of risk mitigation that can prevent strategic fallout later. They might, for example, veto the use of a specific fire mission based on the potential collateral damage estimation presented during the wargame.
It's clear that the wargame is an exhaustive process, but it's designed to produce a course of action that has been vetted through every possible lens, tested against enemy reaction, and synchronized across every functional area. This holistic approach generates the necessary confidence to move forward.
Once that massive analytical effort wargaming is complete, we emerge with 3 or sometimes more heavily refined courses of action. Each one has its associated risks, synchronization matrices, and detailed decision tools.
The staff has done its job. Now the commander must choose. How does the staff help the commander translate that massive quantity of dynamic data into a single, decisive selection?
This is the transition to step 5, course of action comparison. And this is supposed to be an objective process, despite the inherently subjective nature of judging advantages and disadvantages.
How do they attempt to make it objective?
The comparison uses predetermined, commander-approved evaluation criteria developed much earlier, during mission analysis. The goal is simple. Identify the comparative advantages and disadvantages of each course of action to determine the one with the highest probability of success, while balancing risk and resource requirements.
So what does this objective comparison look like in practice, beyond just, talking about pros and cons?
The common doctrinal technique is the decision matrix. The staff takes the evaluation criteria, which might include simplicity, maneuver superiority, responsiveness of fires, sustainment risk, civil control, or speed of execution, and compares how each course of action performs against those specific benchmarks.
But how do they account for the relative importance of those criteria? In a defensive operation, achieving protection superiority is more important than speed, while in a pursuit operation, speed is paramount.
And that is the function of the weighting factor. The chief of staff or the executive officer may assign numerical weights to these criteria based on the commander's determination of their relative importance in achieving the mission's success. A higher weight corresponds to a more critical criterion.
I see.
The staff then assigns a rank, say 1 to 3, where the lowest number usually denotes the preferred option, to each course of action against each criterion, based on the wargame results.
And then math takes over.
Yes. The staff multiplies the rank by the weight to get a weighted score for that criterion. They sum those scores for all criteria to get a total weighted score for each course of action. Mathematically, the course of action with the lowest weighted total is the preferred solution.
So the matrix provides a numerical recommendation, giving the commander a quantitative anchor. But the underlying judgments, what to weight heavily and how to rank performance, are still based on the subjective art of planning. It translates opinion into a manageable number.
Precisely. The power of the matrix is less in the final number and more in forcing the staff to articulate why they value one aspect over another. It eliminates comparison based purely on gut feeling.
So what's the final output of this step?
The staff's output of this comparison process is a final list of advantages and disadvantages, a full accounting of identified risks, and the formally recommended course of action supported by the matrix.
Once the staff has that recommendation, they must present it to the commander in a formal setting. What's included in the course of action decision briefing?
This briefing is really the culmination of the planning team's analytical effort. The chief of staff or executive officer manages the briefing, but individual staff officers present their functional analysis. The staff presents all the refined courses of action, not just the recommended one.
Why all of them?
So the commander sees the full scope of the work and the alternatives. This includes the course of action statement, the accompanying sketch, the rationale behind the concept, the critical events identified during wargaming, and the key advantages and disadvantages of each. They often use the results of the decision matrix to highlight the comparative differences, and they must clearly present the associated risk for each option.
This brings us to step 6, course of action approval. The commander listens, asks questions, and then makes the definitive choice. What are the possible outcomes of this decision?
The commander selects the course of action that, in their judgment, is best suited to accomplish the mission and achieve the desired end state. They fundamentally have 3 choices, and the implication of each is massive.
What's the first one?
First, they can approve the recommended course of action, which moves the staff directly to orders production. That's the ideal outcome.
And the worst outcome?
Second, they could reject all courses of action, a disastrous outcome for the staff, forcing them to return to course of action development, which is step 3.
And the third option, which seems most common.
They can modify a proposed course of action, or even direct a completely new one, using elements from the rejected options or incorporating insights gained from the war game of an enemy course of action.
So mixing and matching.
A commander may approve the movement concept of option A, but mandate the sustainment plan of option C, for instance.
If the commander modifies or directs a new course of action, what is the immediate staff requirement?
Immediate action is required. The staff must instantly incorporate those changes, often by wargaming the new modification briefly to check for unforeseen synchronization errors. It is absolutely vital that all staff members, and especially the current operations cell, fully understand the new approved plan.
So what's the output of this step?
The approval results in the commander issuing final planning guidance for the execution phase and directing the staff to translate the plan into executable directives. That direction is the official transition to step 7.
So, the blueprint is approved. The wargaming is finished. The commander has made a decisive choice. The last step, number 7 of the military decision-making process, is turning that decision into a directive. A clear, unambiguous instruction for the entire force to act.
Step 7 is orders production, dissemination, and transition, as outlined in Field Manual 5.0. The approved course of action statement now becomes the foundational concept of operations for the entire operation plan or order, and the course of action sketch provides the basis for the operation overlay.
So the staff's job is to fill in all the details.
All the missing details, the annexes, appendices, and detachments, ensuring the plan is entirely consistent and nested within the higher echelon commander's intent, concept of operations, and purpose.
What are the key tools from the war game that transition directly into the execution phase, allowing the commander and staff to control the operation once it starts? This is the critical link from planning to execution.
The decision support template and the decision support matrix are paramount. They're the most important outputs of wargaming for the execution phase. The decision support template is a combined intelligence and operations graphic, an overlay that depicts decision points, timelines associated with the flow of the operation, and key information required for execution.
Can you elaborate on the decision support template's utility? Why is it so necessary during execution?
It is the commander's visualization tool for managing the fight. It's built upon intelligence products like the modified combined obstacle overlay, the avenue of approach overlay, the threat template, and the event template.
So it shows you where decisions will need to be made.
Geographically, yes. It shows where the commander anticipated needing to make a decision. For example, the point on the map where the enemy's main body is expected to cross a phase line. Without this graphic, the current operations cell and the intelligence cell cannot quickly identify when they're approaching an anticipated decision point, and therefore cannot prepare the necessary information for the commander in time.
And the decision support matrix, which sounds like the written action plan?
Yes. The decision support matrix is the written record listing those decision points, the specific decisions required, like commit reserves or initiate a fire mission, and the conditions that trigger those decisions. For example, enemy forces cross phase line X.
And it links to the intelligence requirements.
It does. It lists the intelligence or information required to confirm those conditions, often tied directly to commander's critical information requirements, and the planned actions the friendly force will take once that decision is made.
These tools are the literal playbook for control.
They are absolutely crucial for execution control. They help commanders and the current operations cell determine precisely when anticipated decisions are required and what actions to initiate, preventing ad hoc reactions and ensuring disciplined initiative. If the enemy course of action unfolds as anticipated, the staff merely monitors the status against the matrix and initiates the pre-approved action when the trigger condition is met.
We focused heavily on the large-scale methodical process used by higher echelon headquarters with large staffs. How does this rigorous planning connect to the small unit level? The company or platoon commander who doesn't have a massive staff and very little time.
That is the essential link between the military decision-making process and troop leading procedures. For small unit leaders, company level and below, who lack a formal staff, the planning process is necessarily compressed and streamlined into 8 steps known as troop leading procedures.
How is the intensive analysis step handled in that streamlined process?
Step 3 of troop leading procedures is make a tentative plan. This step requires the small unit leader to conduct a rapid mission analysis and course of action development and analysis.
But they don't have time for three options.
No. Due to extreme time constraints, the small unit leader usually develops only a single course of action. However, the essence of the analytical process remains identical to the military decision-making process. The leader must still conduct an intuitive war game.
Thinking it through in their head.
They have to think through the operation, visualizing their friendly actions, enemy reactions, and friendly counteractions to identify what decisions they will likely have to make and where the plan might break down. They conduct this intuitive visualization to confirm or deny information that supports their tentative plan and ensure security, movement, and fires are fully integrated.
So a platoon leader might not build a formal synchronization matrix, but they are conceptually doing the same analysis.
Exactly. They are applying the principle of visualization and risk mitigation. They are anticipating the friction points. The final two steps of troop leading procedures, issue the order, and supervise and refine, are directly linked to orders production and continuous assessment in the larger system.
So the process is compressed, but the goal is the same.
The process is compressed, but the critical thinking and the outcome, a synchronized plan ready for execution, are the same goal. It's about replicating the critical thinking, even without the extensive staff resources, enabling disciplined action under pressure.
We have covered the rigorous analysis, the essential staff collaboration, the specific wargaming methods built, avenue in depth and box, and the final comparison needed to transform a raw idea into a decisive course of action.
A lot of ground to cover.
This process, spanning three critical steps of the military decision-making process, ensures synchronization and maximizes the unit's chances of success in complex, adaptive environments.
You know, the true value of this deep dive isn't just knowing the sequence of steps. It's recognizing that planning is fundamentally about managing uncertainty.
Right.
As Field Manual 5.0 states, the object of planning is not to eliminate uncertainty, that's impossible in war, but to develop a flexible framework for action in the middle of it. War is inherently dynamic. No plan survives initial contact.
But the planning prepares you for that contact.
But by engaging in thorough wargaming and course of action analysis, commanders develop a robust framework that enables disciplined initiative when conditions inevitably change. The analysis generates the necessary branches and sequels so that when the enemy acts, the friendly response is rapid and already planned.
That framework is what empowers mission command principles down the chain.
It does. It enables leaders to execute mission orders with the confidence that their actions are synchronized with the overall effort. I want to leave you with one provocative thought that stems directly from this analytical process.
Okay.
The tension we discussed is between adherence to the plan and necessary adaptation. So if the course of action analysis successfully identifies all the critical events, decision points, and necessary actions for an operation, and the resulting decision support matrix is complete and thorough, how much initiative is truly left for the subordinate commander during the initial execution phase?
And when does a subordinate merely become an executor of the pre-planned decision matrix?
Exactly. And conversely, given the change is guaranteed, when is it necessary for a commander, even during successful execution, to initiate a formal reframe of the entire operation because an unanticipated success or failure has fundamentally invalidated the plan's core assumptions, thereby requiring the entire planning effort to restart? This tension between disciplined adherence and necessary adaptation is the true test of critical thinking and execution.
The difference between operating within the plan and recognizing the need to fundamentally change the plan is often the difference between tactical success and strategic failure. A fascinating question for you to mull over as you consider the planning processes in your own organizations.
Indeed.
Thank you for joining us for another deep dive.
We'll see you next time.